بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم رجسه وطهرهم تطهيرا. أما بعد، قال الله الحكيم في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Our series of discussions go into a sixth night. Yesterday, we were looking at how best we can move from far Allah to Baqiyatullah. There's a tradition in which the Imam says, he says, if all of you collectively were to have the tawfiq to fulfill the promise that you've promised us, there wouldn't be any delay in the dhuhr. What this puts forward and what this tells us is this: that there is a promise that's been given by us to the Imam. And at the same time, it isn't just an individual promise. What you see is that there's a collective promise. Where we left off yesterday was this: that there are certain fitnas which are going to rise, fitan, in the last days. Internally, one of those is that ideologically and politically it will be divided. When these divisions come, and these divisions become public, then know that your enemies will overcome you, because that lutf of the Imam is not there anymore. That lutf of the Imam is there for as long as we're united. In the same way, there is a huge emphasis on this concept of unity. Here the Imam is saying collectively, if you come together, there's great power in this collectivity. If that collectivity isn't there, then what happens is that we collapse as a unit. There could be millions of followers of the Ahlul Bayt in the world, but without that collectivity, without that brotherhood of fraternity, what you come to realize is that slowly you begin to collapse. Now remember, when we talk about the Imam, it's not just the collectivity of Muslims. In fact, it's the whole world that comes together on goodness. The Imam alayhi salam is not just for us. The Imam alayhi salam is for everyone. And this is why you find that within all traditions, there's a relic of the Imam there. If you go to Judaism, there's a discussion on the Mashiach. If you go into Christianity, there's a discussion on the coming back of the Messiah, the second coming of Jesus. In the same way, within every faith, whether you look at Taoism, whether you look at Buddhism, whether you look at various different strands of Hinduism, what you do find is that there is a personality who will come back, who will lift the consciousness of humanity, and at the same time spread truth and justice and peace and harmony and so forth. We as Shias don't have, in essence, apocalyptic traditions in a way that says the world has to collapse. No. With the coming of the Imam, what you find is that there's a raising of the human mind. Compassion begins to flow and so forth. It doesn't need to be all doom and gloom. But the question is this: are humanity ready to come together and unite together? That's the most important thing. This is why you realize that within Islam, you've been told. So the first thing the Prophet did, after 13 years in Mecca, when he comes to Medina, the first thing that he establishes is a mosque. And you come to understand that around this mosque, all the work is done. If people were getting married in the olden days, it was in the mosque. If there was business taking place, it was in the mosque. If people needed a place to sleep, it was in the mosque. If people were dialoguing with each other, it was in the mosque. The purpose was this: when you go to a foreign land, the most important thing the Prophet is emphasizing is a jama'at. Come together, work together, be together, resolve your issues together. This is what the Prophet was emphasizing. What we see is that we continue this by when we come to new countries, when we go to new cities, we do try and create. But the problem is this, that we start breaking off, infighting starts taking place, and all sorts of these things. Now look, even if you can't get along together, it shouldn't overflow your infighting out. You see what I mean? It shouldn't go outside. It shouldn't become something which is a way of detriment to the Shia community. And in this way, a detriment to Islam. And in this way, a detriment to the society that you live in. Because remember, let's say, for example, we live in Houston. In Houston, you may have all sorts of people from different backgrounds, from different races, from different cultures. If one suffers, everyone suffers. It's like the body. If my finger suffers in my left hand, my entire body is going to feel the pain. In this way, if you find that the Christian community is going through pain, if the Jewish community is going through pain, if the Sunni community is going through pain, the bottom line is where you live, all of you are going to face this. So in this way, when one community improves, all the other communities improve. Why? Because you're one body. Here Rasulullah teaches us this. There were 6 parts that Medina was divided in. You had the Jewish quarters, you had the Christian quarters, and so forth. You had all of these quarters which were there, and each area was judging according to its own rules. Here Rasulullah said, he said that if you can't resolve your issues, then come to me, I'll help you. From an outsider's perspective, from an Orientalist perspective, from an academic perspective, what does that mean? That tells you that Rasulullah knew the faith of other people to be able to help them. Look, if I turn around to somebody and I say, for example, to a Sunni, that if you have ikhtilaf amongst yourself, if you cannot resolve your own issues, come to me. What does that mean? That means I must be a mufti over their fiqh to be able to resolve their issues. Right? In the same way, if Rasulullah is saying to a Jew or a rabbi, if you can't resolve your issues, come to me. What does that mean? The question is answered in the time of the 8th Imam. You look at this and see. Ma'mun Rashid calls all of the intellectuals of the world and he says to all of them, come. Look, now that we're on this, let me give you a tradition. Ayatollah Wahid al-Khurasani one day was giving his dars, giving his lesson. He's 103 years old. In the middle of his lesson, Masjid al-Azam, he tells us a story. The story was like this. He said that once upon a time, say once upon a time meaning in his time when he was younger, 60, 70 years ago, or maybe even 100 years ago, this was a story that he'd heard from his contemporaries at the time. There was a group of people who went from Najaf to India. When they went to India, they had in their mind that there's a person whose life is very long. Now you find this, there are people whose life is long. This person had lived for hundreds of years. So they went there with the intention of speaking to this person. When they went to find him, they came close to the Himalaya mountains. And over there, they went to look for him. So they came across a mountain and that there was a cave. There was a young boy sitting outside. He said that, sorry, you've come here too late. Because our leader or whoever it was, he goes in the cave for 6 months, he comes out for 6 months. You've just missed him, he's gone inside. So they said, look, we've come all the way from Najaf. We've come all the way from Najaf. Ask him to come out. The reply is that he said that he will not come out for the 6 months unless if Adam comes. So they thought, who was Adam? So they said, look, we're Adam, we're children of Adam, Yabna Adam. Call him. So they said that this young boy went inside. He said to his Allah, look, come outside. Adam is there. So he puts his head out. He said, come on, these are not Adam. So these ulama say, so now that you've come out, just tell us, who's Adam? What's the story? Why would you only come out for Adam? You know what he replies? He replies like this. He says, when I was young, we'd been called to come to Arab lands. At the time, there was a Khalifa. The Khalifa had called all of us to congregate in a particular area. He said, when we went to congregate in that particular area, we could see all of the intellectuals and leaders, religious leaders of the world were congregating in that area. He said, you could see that they were discussing things. You could see the birds were flying and so forth. He painted this picture. He said, a time came when Adam came. When Adam came, when he walked in, none of us knew who he was. But something inside of us pushed us to stand up. He said, we all stood up in respect for this person who came in. And whatever question we asked him, he answered in our own language, from our own books, and the hadith. We look at it and see, you'll find it as well. So he asked, who is this Adam? Who was he? He said, this person was Ali ibn Musa Rada. when he walked in the court of Ma'mun, when he walked into the court of Ma'mun, when I was asking, he was replying in Sanskrit. When others were asking, he was replying in Hebrew. When others were asking, he was replying in Aramaic, and so forth. He knew their scriptures. In fact, if you look at Shaykh al-Saduq's Kitab al-Tawheed, you'll see when the chief rabbi comes, and Imam says to him, let me read what you're looking at. So he opened the book. Imam was standing there. He was reading in the finest of Hebrew, that which was in his hand. The man says, firstly, you don't know which page I've opened it. And secondly, the way that you're reading is better than the way that we read it. What does that tell you? That tells you the ilm of the Imam is not just confined to one thing. So here when Rasulullah says that if you have an ikhtilaf between yourselves, come and ask me. What does that tell you? It tells you this, that Rasulullah's sunnah is to know the tradition of other people. Today, when 900 verses of the Quran deal with Bani Israel, today the vast majority of us don't have a clue what the Torah or the Zabur or the Injil says. Okay, fine, the Injil may not be anymore. But let's say, for example, the Gospels. We don't have an idea or a clue. And when we don't have a clue, we don't understand the rabt in the Quran. I'll give you an example. When the Quran says, when Ayatul Kursi you recite that Allah doesn't slumber or sleep, even your children know that. You can ask the question, what are you talking about, slumber or sleeping? We know Allah doesn't. Allah's metaphysical. However, this is not for you. There's certain verses for the discussions and the arguments that were taking place amongst Ahlul Kitab then. So many a time we have to come to understand even the Quran sometimes what the context was. What does that tell you? What's Islam telling you? Just be broad-minded. Here, what does Rasulullah say? When Rasulullah comes in, those 10 years that he spends, people are living in harmony. That's the most important thing. People were not scared. They were ruling within their own traditions. You don't find any place in the world today that says, have a part of Houston, you have your laws, the other part of Houston, they have their laws and so forth. But this is something, and anywhere in the world, you don't find this anywhere in the world like that. But here Rasulullah was implementing this, that you rule according to the Torah, you do according to your traditions. If you have a problem, then come back to me. Do you see? What's Rasulullah trying to teach us? Al-Zahir, what he's saying is this, that everyone is in peace. And everyone has a place in society. And everyone's issues matter. If one community is suffering, then the whole community is suffering. Bear this in mind. Why do I say all of this? For one purpose, that when you look at the traditions of the Imam, why is it that you've been told when 40 people come together and pray, Allah accepts the du'as? Collectively, when you pray for the sick, Allah accepts your du'as. Why do they say that come and pray jama'at? Why does the tradition there come and pray Jum'ah? What's the purpose of people congregating together? Why have you been told that you should eat together? There's a tradition that says that a believer's life is extended and their rizq is extended. That when a person comes to eat with them, they take longer so that people around them can eat more, fill their stomachs, for example. If you're a host, you've not been told eat quickly and move on so that other people don't have an opportunity to eat. You've been told sit there, even if you're not eating, but sit there so other people are not inhibited not to eat. Right, there's a hadith on this. Imam al-Sadiq says, he says, Allah increases the life and the risk of a person. So look, tomorrow if you're thinking, why is my risk constricted? Feed people. Call people to your homes. Feed them and let them eat properly. In this way, what does Allah do? He increases your risk, He increases your life. All of this for one reason. Be a community. Be together. Here the tradition goes as far as to say, that if we implement the words of the Imam, so here one of the Imams says, like it's the fifth Imam when he's discussing, when they're talking about the last days, they're saying the reason why the 12th Imam doesn't come is because that brotherhood isn't there anymore. You've been told that if there is a need that your brother has, he should have or she should have the confidence to be able to go to you and you should be able to fulfill their needs. It's as if that your pocket becomes their pocket and their pocket becomes your pocket. Not in the way that you abuse somebody, not in the way that, for example, you need $10 and you go and take $100. No, that's not the case. The case is if a person's need is $10, the community should be able to fulfill their need if it's required and if that person doesn't have the means. So what I'm saying is not the fact that abuse you and they take more money. No. The fact is this, that our community should be such that whenever there's a need, you fulfill that need. Right. So bear this in. We're not there at all yet in any shape or form. We're not there yet. You know, you find people who are needy, but we're not there to fulfill their need. You find students who have come here, but they're suffering. They don't have enough money to pay for their bills. We don't have a mechanism yet in place like other communities do. There are other communities who have mechanisms in place to help their students, to help people to get married, to help people to find a room, for example, if they require. All of these things are there. There are other communities. We don't have that mechanism yet. In fact, even within the house of Shiism, you may not have that mechanism, but there's other communities within the house of Shiism who have that mechanism. They'll pay the bills for the students, for example, their student loans. They'll make sure that when two people get married, there's something there to help them to get married and so forth. That's a community. We're very far away from that. But one day we'll get there. That's the important thing. There needs to be a goal and an aim for us to get there to help one another. So bear this in mind. I mentioned a tradition a couple of days ago of Ali ibn Mahdiyar. There were 3 things that the Imam said to him. 3 reasons why your heart is not... In essence, he was saying that, look, Mawla, I've been waiting for you. Mawla says, I've been waiting for you. But there are things that stop you from meeting me. Meaning what? There are things that stop the heart of a person from connecting to the Imam. Heart stops. You know what the first thing is? The Imam says to Ali ibn Mahdiyar, he says the first thing is this, that you've drowned yourself in the dunya. That's where the problem is. When materialism increases, spirituality decreases. Bear this in mind. When materialism increases, sometimes you go to mosques, and I've been there. You go to mosques, people are very nice, but what they care more about is their clothes. Wearing the latest designer clothes. Having for example, the designer car. Wearing the designer watch. All of those things, which it's not a bad thing. But what you can see is their mentality is such as that they've drowned themselves in the dunya. The minute that you drown yourself in the dunya, however good you are, you start divorcing yourself from spirituality. Bear this in mind. Your possessions shouldn't overcome you. You shouldn't be possessed by your possessions. You know, there are communities, and perhaps I'll be going to certain communities maybe in the next 6 months or so, without mentioning, but you know certain communities you go to, all they care about is what's in the parking lot. All they care about is the designer clothes that they're wearing. And they're good people, but you know what? That spirituality is not there. It's not bad to wear good things. What I'm saying is don't be possessed by your properties. And this is what the Imam is saying. It's materialism that's destroyed you. It's the love of the dunya that's destroyed you. It's the hub of the dunya that's destroyed you. Can you leave everything all of a sudden? No, it's good to be rich, but you should be able to leave all of these things when it comes. You shouldn't be possessed with all of these things. Look, I've given this story before, but I'll give it again. Right? Ayatollah Naraki wrote a very powerful book on spirituality. And they say that when Ayatollah said Mahdi Bahrul Ulum, the marja of the time, saw it, he was very happy. Very happy. When Ayatollah Naraki came to Najaf, said Mahdi Bahrul Ulum, and Ayatollah Naraki wanted to meet Said Mahdi Bahrul Ulum, but he didn't meet him. And again they say the same thing happened. He didn't meet him again. And he didn't respond to him. So eventually when they did meet, you found that Ayatollah Naraki wasn't offended. For Sayyid Mahdi Bahrul Ulum said to him, I was testing you to see that will you follow all of those principles that you've written? If you've written this book and you have no spirituality yourself, then you're giving lip service to something. If you're writing something, we want to see if you have the patience as well. Let's test you and see. Let's see how your akhlaq is. When you feel offended, many people have felt offended. If I come knock on your door and you don't reply, then what happens? I'll feel offended. This person didn't reply to me. This person didn't give me respect. Now let's see what your ego is like. In the same way they say that there was a person who learnt from the book of Ayatollah Naraki, and he says, look, I've come on the pathway of spirituality because of him. Let me go and see how he lives. When he came to Isfahan, he saw a huge house. He said, maybe I'm mistaken. Ayatollah Naraki would be living in a huge house. Knocked on the door, realized Ayatollah Naraki was there. He thought to himself, this guy's a munafiq. He teaches spirituality. Look at the house that he lives in. Ayatollah Naraki realized. He says, I know exactly what he's thinking. So let's see, let's test him. So he says to him, let's go now on a journey. Let's go to do ziyarah. Both of them go together. Eventually a time comes when the person says, all right, I need to go back to your home. He says, why? He says, listen, when I repented, everything after that I did, I sleep with my bowl. I put the head like a pillow. I drink through my bowl. I eat in my bowl. When I go to the bathroom, I put the water in my bowl. Everything I do is this bowl. I've left it in your house. Because I did tawbah. When I did tawbah, it was this bowl. We've got to go back. Let me go and grab the bowl. Ayatollah Naraki says, I'll get you another bowl. He says, you don't understand. That's a special bowl. He says, I can get you another one. And backwards and forwards, Ayatollah Naraki then says, he said, I left everything of my life back there. Everything. And I'm moving to ziyarah. He says, I don't have any attachments, but you're attached to your bowl. Sometimes a human being can be attached to the smallest thing. So bear this in mind, what Ayatollah Naraki is teaching, he says, don't be attached. If Allah gives to you, you should be able to let everything go in one go. This is what the Imams are teaching. Somebody knocks on their door, they take the wealth and they give it to him. Stories in front of you. A person knocks on the door of the Imam, right? The muqaddam of this, the introduction of this is what, if you go back, this person comes into Medina. He says, I'm poor. Somebody says, go to the door of Hussein ibn Ali. He goes, you go on his door. Go to the door of Hussein ibn Ali. So he goes there and he begins to recite a qasida. He says, Hussein ibn Ali, there's no one more sakhi than you are. And your father was Ali. And he begins to recite and recite. Imam Hussein gets up. He looks towards all of his household. He says, my household, there's a needy person outside. A needy brother. Are you willing to give anything? Imam Hussein gathers whatever he had. When he puts his hand out, he says, brother, take this. Forgive me. It's not enough. That person looks and he begins to cry. He says, this is not enough. This is not enough. Some traditions say, the amount that the Imam gave may be equal to $15,000, $20,000. Imagine somebody knocking on your door. You may give him $5. This person he begins to cry. He says, I only came for, let's say, $10. The Imam has given $20,000 to me. He begins to cry. Mawla says, please forgive me if this is not enough. He says, Mawla, that's not why I'm crying. I'm crying because I'm thinking, is there a day that's going to come that you're going to be in the grave and somebody's going to chuck dirt on you? He goes, is that possible? Somebody this sakhi is going to die one day? Is Allah going to subject him to that? Imam Hussein didn't tell him what was going to happen to him. But bear this in mind. Bear this in mind. Here the most important thing, when we mentioned yesterday, that ikhtilaf of the believer is a fitna in akhir al-zaman. One of the reasons is that our akhlaq goes. There's a tradition that says there are 5 things that a believer has. If they don't have these qualities, they're not a believer. One of those qualities is that they don't argue when it comes to fighting. Somebody tries to provoke you to get you into an argument. You wouldn't respond to that. There's another hadith that says that it hardens the heart when a person responds to an ignorant person. Just have a debate backwards and forwards. Sometimes that a person, all they want is they just want to prove themselves as being right. Fine, you're right, you be quiet then. Second quality is this, that a person has akhlaq. What does akhlaq mean? You find today that if I disagree with somebody, I'll say really bad things about them. If I disagree with a lecturer, I'll use very bad and foul language. Even to this extent that ulama are disregarded, disrespected. The other day I went online to see some of the ulama, there was an alim had said something. Now the comments, there was maybe 200 comments against him. On one issue that wasn't even halal or haram, it was an opinion by that person. And there was 200 comments negative. And they were Shias. You could tell by their names. Inshallah, they weren't, but ala dhahir they were. At that stage, you think to yourself, this is what Islam has come to? That there's not even akhlaq for a person who sits on the minbar? Let alone akhlaq amongst yourselves. If the akhlaq is not there, then where's the akhlaq going? The same people also bash the maraja. Same people even disrespect their parents. Right? It wasn't like, 15 years ago, people never came to me in those days disrespecting their parents. In 2025, I've seen people come to me and disrespect their parents and say, this happened or that happened. As time is going, people are changing, and for the worst. So to quickly come back and complete this tradition of Ali ibn Mahziyah, here Imam says to him, he says, firstly, your love of dunya is what stops you. But the second thing is this, that you people say harsh things to each other. Remember, believers are brothers. If you want to guide somebody, you don't say harsh things to them. If Rasulullah told somebody, I'll give you a tradition, for example. A person comes into the masjid, he starts urinating in the masjid. Ashab are willing to attack him. Rasulullah says, leave it, let him finish. Maybe his mentality is that. We can clean it up. We can make a mosque tahir. But if you break somebody's heart, you can't mend it again. If somebody came into your mosque and started urinating, let's be honest, you'd chuck that person out even before they finished. What does Rasulullah say? Let him finish. Sahaba like, look, he's urinating. He's badoon. He doesn't know. From the Arab, he doesn't know. Finished. He called him, he says, brother, and then he explains it to him. Lovingly, the person changes. Lovingly explains. So if you feel that somebody is wrong, you disagree with somebody, by disrespecting them, you're not going to change him. What you're doing is without realizing it, you're feeding into your own ego. It's your ego that's doing this. You're guided by your own ego. Behind your ego is shaitan. So your amal is the amal of shaitan. It's not the amal of Ahlul Bayt. What did the Ahlul Bayt do? The Ahlul Bayt, kindness, compassion, they try and teach you. Why? Because they want you to be guided. They don't want you to be misguided. Somebody does something, they make a mistake, you see half a dozen of these people are attacking them. Whether it's in the masjid, whether it's online, whether it's from a distance, immediately people are, and in particular if you dislike the person, and that said, you'll butcher them completely. You don't leave even meat on their bones because of the way that you do things. That's not the way of the Imam. If you look at the Imams, even with their enemies, they were compassionate. Why? Because Amr bil Ma'ruf, when it comes to it, is what? Lovingly teaching a person so that you help them to change. Today we do takfir. I'm not saying you, just generically saying, we do takfir. This is not a Muslim, this is not a good Muslim, this is not a good believer. What's Rasulullah saying? He's saying even the munafiq, bring them into Islam. Look at it and see, the conquest of Mecca takes place. You have a concept known as mu'allifatul qulub. Rasulullah gave things to certain people for them to convert. He gave them more money. Why? He knew they were munafiq. But he gave them more money. Why? So that their heart could slowly melt towards Rasulullah in the way of Islam. But listen, what do we do? What do we? Look at the way that we are today. It's disgusting. Honestly, it is. The way that people behave, the way that people talk, the way that people disrespect. All of these things are in front of you. Here the Imam is saying, he's saying, it's your egos when it comes to each other, it's the way that you treat each other. It's your bad akhlaq that's dividing you. And this is why I don't come to you. Because if you're behaving like this amongst each other, then what? Heart is closed. Third thing now the Imam says. He says it's because of the fact that you've cut the ties of the womb. You're not doing silatul raham anymore. Because of that, you're blocked from me. Some of the ulama have done a commentary on this. They say that here the Imam is not just talking about relatives. He's also talking about the Islamic family. Each of you brothers are part of one raham of wilayah. And if you're disrespecting each other and cutting the ties with each other, then ultimately what you're doing is that you're cutting the ties of mercy with each other. So bear this in mind. If you have a problem, and this is Akhirul Zaman, you will have problems. Make sure you treat each other with the best. There's ways of saying things. There's ways of saying things. This is why you notice when ulama, when they want to explain something to each other, they say it in a loving way. If Maulana wants to explain something to me, he's going to tell me in a loving way. He's going to say to me in such a way that not only am I going to love him more, but I'll do islah of myself. That's how you do things. Bear this in mind. This is how Rasulullah did things. This is how Amir al-Mu'mineen did this. This is how Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein did these things. They would explain it to a person in a loving way. That's how you build that relationship with the Imam, right? Let me give you a story. There have been people in the past who their hearts have been linked with the Imam. Imam would come to them. Now in this day and age, many people who have claimed to have seen the Imam, it's more than possible that it's one of the awtad of the Imam. Because our tradition is such that there are certain individuals which are around the Imam, not the 313 or the 40. There's certain people who are around. When one dies, Allah replaces him with the other. So in this crowd, it's possible that there's a person who's one of the helpers of the Imam. His job is to help. When he dies or she passes away, then Allah replaces him with another person. So there were people like this in the olden days that one knew about. Sheikh Murtaza Zahid says, 60, 70 years ago, there was a person by the name of Sayyid Karim. Sayyid Karim Khafash. He was a Khafashi basically. He says that one day Sayyid Karim was in his home and used to rent his home. So Sahib and Makan, basically, the person who owns the house came. He says, Sayyid Karim, you've not paid your rent in time. I'd like you to leave. I'm not happy with you being here. Immediately Sayyid Karim got all of his things together. The reason being was this. He says, I have to pray here as well. If a person's not happy with me staying in their place, then even my prayer becomes batil. He takes everything and he goes out and he sits on the road. Because of his wife and his children were there, he makes a kind of a hijab so that they could be sheltered, so they could be underneath. He says as he's sitting there, he looks up and he sees, who is it? The Master of the Times. The Master of the Times now comes to give him to a sort of peace. He says, Sayyid Karim, this time will pass. This time will pass. It's okay, you're on the road, but don't worry, Allah has something more. Who's giving him peace? Imam is coming giving him peace. You know, the interesting thing is, he turns around and he says, look, we Ahlul Bayt have faced many trials and tribulations. Take it from us. Take lessons from us. Now, Sayyid Karim was on a level with the Imam, so he decided to joke with the Imam. He says, we only talk about the extreme times, but maybe there's times of goodness as well. The Imam smiles there. Imagine being able to joke with the Imam. Forget us joking. We can't even see the Imam. Hey, Imam smiles. He says, don't worry. Don't worry. You'll be fine. Sayyid Karim says, a person came to him within minutes of the Imam disappearing and resolved his issue. And I'd go into the story, but we only have a couple of minutes to conclude this particular discussion. Otherwise, it would take me 10 minutes to conclude this discussion. And time is rapidly going. What does that tell you? That tells you this. Open these eyes. Open these eyes. Now, in his lifetime, Sayyid Karim had said, don't tell anyone. After his death, then people told people. Remember, there's a tradition that says, if anyone claims to have seen the Imam, and they come out and they say they're a liar. Now, there's many different conditions on this. It's not as straightforward as that. In particular, those people who come out for fame. You have certain people who say, come to me because I've seen the Imam and the Imam instructed. No, people can meet the Imam. So this tradition doesn't negate that. People like Sayyid Mahdi Bahr al-Ulum know this tradition. But as you know, they've met the Imam more times than most other people in Ghaybat Kubra have. In the same way, Sayyid Musa Zarabadi, Sayyid Jalil said, the son of Sayyid Musa Zarabadi, he said that my father has met the Imam, if not more, but exactly the amount of times that Sayyid Mahdi Bahr al-Ulum has. And Sayyid Musa Zarabadi died within the last century. His student was a guy called Sheikh Hashim al-Qazwini and Sayyid Mujtaba Qazwini, who were the teachers of Atala Sistani. If I was to go into Sayyid Musa Zarabadi, I could take the next half an hour just talking about him. Sahib Karamat. Inshallah, tomorrow we will do. Ayatollah Shushtari says, I heard from him, Abdul Qaim al-Shushtari. Says Sayyid Musa Zarabadi was Sahib Tasarruf. If he was to point at the tree would come to him. If you used to point towards the shoes and say like this, the shoes would come to Sahib Tasarruf. Wilayat Tasarruf he had. He had this ability to do these things. Tomorrow, inshallah, we'll discuss it. We'll go deeper into it. But look, I know that these programs are going on very long. So therefore, I'll have to cut my time down so that other people can get their time. Before we go there, one of the youth asked a question. I like the question earlier today. There's a Maulana yesterday you said that if you want to develop your spirituality, you should try and eat more from Sahib-e-Wilayah. What does this mean? Right? Because obviously, it makes our life difficult. Let me tell you something. There's something which is halal and haram. You've been told to follow that. I'll give you an example. Let's say you go to a restaurant. The person says, it's from Yad Muslim, they say this is halal. You have itminan. Let's say, God forbid, it wasn't, and you ate it. With certainty it was halal. There's no sin for you there. But the spiritual effect of something that you've taken, which is not halal, affects your soul. There's no sin. Similarly, for example, you go to places. I'll give you an example. You go to Mecca. You go to Mecca. Their system of taharat is different from us. You've seen people urinate themselves. They come with detergent, they clean it up. We have a particular mode of making something tahir. It doesn't fit our mode. But at the same time, you've not seen it. So therefore, you're allowed to, for example, walk over whatever it may be. Right? Let's say, for example, there's water here. You don't know if it's najis or tahir, so you take it as tahir, because asalat of taharat, basically. The primacy of purification, you take it and you say yes. However, one cannot deny that there's spiritual effect on everything. I remember Ayatollah Langarudi, Sahib Karamat. I remember 25 years ago, at the time I happened to be in London, he came for treatment. There were 3 or 4 people he ate from. Forget the entire congregation. Why? Because when I say Ahle Wilayah here, I'll tell you what I mean. So I remember he was sitting there. The congregation is there. Well, the believers. But he didn't eat from them. He didn't drink from them. He would either ask me to go and get him water. Or there was another alim there, Ali Abbas Razawi. You know him, his famous Urdu speaker. He said, he's taken to him, you go and get it for me. Or there was another person at the time who was there in London from Qom, Ay Rahimiyan. One of the great Urafa of our time, basically. So, he wouldn't ask anybody else. Why? Because he was strict on the concept of, he said, look, my wilayah can diminish if I take something which is, and if it diminishes, I won't be able to help people. So when people found out he was there, he was sick, but for 3 hours there was a queue. People were coming, Agha, I have this problem. He'd give him a dua. Agha, I have that problem. And this is in front of our eyes. He would do that. So what he said was, he said that my food, my drink, everything needs to be pure in a way. Special blessings need to be done in a way that my wilayah doesn't decrease. So he said, for example, don't give me food from Munkir Ali. From Munkir of the wilayat of Ali, because my own wilayat will depreciate. This is in front of me. So no, it is halal. You go to a restaurant, no issues. But if you want to be at that level of tasarruf, then there's a different protocol to that. So this is what I was implying. There's special blessings to that. I'll give you an example. When a Hasidic rabbi comes to my house, I can tell him as much as I want that I've cleaned it like this, done it like this. But he would say, look, get it from this place where there's a certificate with this packaging. I respect that. I get it from there because they have special blessings that I may not be able to recite. When, for example, certain Brahmin Hindus come, they have a particular style. Don't put onions in mine. Don't put, for example, ginger or garlic or whatever it is in my, make it like this, make it like that. And they may bring their own food. And I've had this, I don't get offended. Fine, maybe I don't know the protocol. Maybe I don't know the dua that you recite in your faith over your food. The blessing that you do. I'm not offended. Bring it over, eat, no issues. In the same way, there's certain blessings, there's certain dua which is recited over food. For example, ulama have said, for example, if your children are young, try and recite certain dua over food so that they can become Ahle Wilayah. So yesterday, I wasn't talking about halal and haram. I don't want to make your life difficult. Go to your restaurants, do what you need to do. But yes, if you want to be different, if you want that special, then it's different then. Then it's different. Then, for example, you may not be able to eat meat as much as you do. for example, because the tradition says don't make your... And ulama, if you look at it, towards the end of Ayatollah Bahjat's life, I remember speaking to his eldest son. People generally see the middle son who's on television. I'm talking about the eldest son, who you'll never see on television. I remember him saying to me, I remember we were eating together, he said, look, it's difficult, and this is back in 2008, 2007. He was saying to me, it's difficult for me at this moment to feed our father meat, for example. He's not taking it. Right? So they have a different protocol. It doesn't mean meat is haram. But sometimes the Urafa do what's known as tarka haywani. But for that, you need a master, spiritual master, to prescribe it to you. So I'm not saying, hey, do things yourself willy-nilly. No, go to a master for them to prescribe it. But at the same time, remember this, there is another protocol there for those Urafa. They have a different lifestyle to you. For example, they may fast more than you do. They get up for tahajjud. It's like what Ayatollah Abdul Karim Kashmiri says. Somebody asked him, they said, what are the ways of me reaching spirituality? He says, firstly, tahajjud. Secondly, fasting. Thirdly, being quiet. Sukut, he said. He said, be quiet, don't talk much. Ayatollah Bahjat didn't talk for 4 years. You and I can't do that. And especially with the phone you can't, because you're texting left, right and center. You can't do that. And Allah hasn't told you to do that either. But these are special practices of the Urafa for certain things. So yesterday what we were saying is different. If you want to be like Salman, the protocol is different. If you want to be like Abu Dhar, the protocol is different. If you want to increase the ishq in your heart, the protocol is different. Inshallah, we'll expand on it tomorrow. Look, I'm cognizant of the time. It's been 40 minutes or so. And I'm trying to conclude within an hour. Yesterday I went an hour and 3 minutes, we just checked. I want to make sure that I finish within an hour. Unfortunately, it's going to have to be like it is, because we've got back-to-back until midnight. Maulana has to speak. You've invited half a dozen reciters from Pakistan. They have to do all of their things. So unfortunately, we're going to have to speed up. And if many of you are here from Masaib, I know. If you want to listen to Masaib, I'm going to have to cut down on my fadail to go into the Masaib. And I know people are coming from far away, and I know some of you can't make it on time. I know this is in the north, you're finishing your majalis in the south, and this is why I can see 5 minutes, 10 minutes into my lecture, then it gets full up. So I know you're coming, but unfortunately it is what it is. It's not parallel, so we're going to have to do what we're going to have to do. And there's no way we can start early, because otherwise you'd miss your 7 o'clock majlis. So in this way, bear with me. But inshallah, whatever I can give you, I'll give you. And the rest of it, inshallah, another time when we're here. There will be things, inshallah. I want to discuss some of these Urafa and some of their prescriptions that they've given. And I will do in the coming days. But if there's one message you can take away from here, you don't need to do tarka haywani. You don't need to do any of these things. I'll give you a solution. Just have good akhlaq amongst each other. You'll see Allah will raise you. Why is that? Because the difficulties of Akhir Zaman are such that Allah takes it easy on you. 1400 years ago, when the conditions are different, it's different. Today it's as easy as respecting one another. You'll see Allah will bring you up. If you have a problem with somebody, if you don't disrespect them. If you have ikhtilaf, don't. If you disagree with somebody, don't disrespect them. Help them with your akhlaq. Work on that. You know where akhlaq begins? Final thing I'll say. Akhlaq begins at home. Learn to respect and love your spouse. And you see everything else begins from there. And I've said that, you can see people's faces now drop. The spouse is everything. It was a very good thing you're saying. The spouse is everything. It's easy to show akhlaq to a person that you don't know. But the person that you neglect is your husband or wife. A husband walks in, he's had a bad day. You can tell. You know what the wife says? She says, I can look at his face and tell today's going to be like shimmer. Immediately, you can tell. It says, children, get ready. Today, Malik al-Ashtar is not coming. Today, shimmer is coming in the house. But it should never be like that. And you know as well, I'm not going to give any name of any woman 1400 years ago because it could be contentious. But there was a woman who used to chuck things at Rasulullah. You know, the minute you walk into the house, you come to realize maybe the Battle of Jamal is about to start. Right? It shouldn't be like that. You know when the hadith says, "Man tazawwaja faqad ahraza nisfa dinah," half of your faith is preserved. Why? In marriage, because of the akhlaq you show each other. Learn the akhlaq of Amir al-Mu'mineen Fatima al-Zahra, honestly. Look, I won't go any more than that. Inshallah, we'll continue tomorrow. I know people have come to cry. So I'm going to cut down on my actual discussion so that we have more time for people to cry. Look, you know what today is? Today, there's probably more women today. You know why? Because today we're going to be crying for Ali Asghar. There are people who have come here with many hajat. Many hajat. When that cradle comes out today, you'll find many people will go because they have hajat in their hearts. I know people are wanting to cry tonight. I know people are wanting to do dua tonight. Therefore, inshallah, when the light closes, I know you feel more comfortable in crying when the light closes. I'm going to start reciting. Those people who can close the light so that people can cry. Allah accept their du'as. We close the light so people can cry. Because people are ready. Let me start off on this though. Where I come from in Scotland, we have highlands, which are Scotland's a beautiful place, by the way. When you go to the highlands, as if you can see the clouds coming down. Beautiful place. Maulana's been there recently, was there in Glasgow. The population of Scotland is less than London, though Scotland is the size of England. So there are no mosques everywhere. About 15 years ago or so, there was a couple, two doctors. They used to live in the highlands. They tried everything, but they couldn't have any children. Couldn't have any children. One of them was telling me this. I was on Hajj actually, in 2013, and they were telling, one of the husband was telling me this. He said, when we were in the highlands, all of our majalis would live stream. It was newly introduced, people would go online, they would live stream. He said, I knew that we couldn't have children. He said, a time came when my wife called me and said, come, the Masayib of Ali Asghar is taking place. Right after that, they were watching, a cradle came out. When the cradle came out, they touched the screen, both of them. The wife said to the husband, we've tried everything. Now let's try this. Let's ask Mawla Hussein in the name of a 6-month-old baby to give us a son. You know what happened? 9 months later, Allah gave them a son. Why? Barakah of Ali Asghar. Ayatollah Zarabadi would say, he would say, whenever I had a problem spiritually, I would take the wasila of this 6-month-old baby and Allah would remove the difficulty. Right? There may be people here today who can't have children. When the cradle comes out, just remember a mother. Which mother? You know how sad it is. You know, if I can tell you, sometimes I think to myself, what a mother Rabab is. All of her nasl in one go was wiped out. If I could narrate it, you know when the day of Arba'in came, she says to Imam Zain al-Abidin, she says, son, leave me here in Karbala. He says, mother, why don't you come home? She goes, I've got nothing to live for in Medina now. My daughter is sleeping in Sham. My son, my Mawla, both of them are sleeping here. Leave me here so tomorrow when the Zawar of Hussein come, I can say, Hada Qabr al-Hussein. Leave me here. Leave me here. I've got nothing to live for anymore. Sometimes I wondered, why did Imam Hussein walk in the way that he did And it was recited every time he walked, he was saying, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. I think sometimes. An incident took place in Qom once. There was an Indian student. His wife sent him, said, go to the hospital, Bimaristana Gulpegani. The child was sick. We saw that when he went to the hospital, his child died there. Then what we saw was this. We saw him walking on the road. He would go to the door of his house, back to the road, to the door, back to the road. Somebody asked him, they said, why are you doing this for? You know what the reply was? He said that the mother is inside. When she gave me this child to take, the child was Salim, he was alive. Now that he's dead, I don't know how to go inside and tell the mother that the child is dead. Look, if Allah gives me the power to recite, I'll recite. Allah accept your tears. It's not easy to recite this musibah. It wasn't easy for Imam Hussein either. You know what the tradition says? The tradition says on the 9th of Muharram, Imam Hussein, as you know, was walking from tent to tent. Every time he would walk, tears would come in his eyes because you would see how a mother is talking to their children. Eventually he comes to a tent where there was a cradle. In the cradle there was a child. This mother was rocking the cradle and she was saying, oh son, I'm not from Banu Hashim, but you're so small, son. Tomorrow when all of the other mothers are giving their sacrifice, I'm going to feel embarrassed, son, on the day of judgment. When Fatima Zahra comes and you're only 6 months old, I don't know what to say to her. Says, son, if a time comes that maybe you have to go, son, maybe go and do something. And she's talking to her son. And Imam Hussein is crying. And he's thinking, look at this and see. Even this mother is talking like this to the sis. You know what the tradition says? Look, I'm accelerating completely so I can finish quickly. They say that the day of Ashura comes. One by one, each family member is going and giving their life. Ashab Hussein have gone. They say a time comes when Imam Hussein is all alone. وَنَظَرَ يَمِينَ وَنَظَرَ shimal. Imam Hussein looks at one side, he looks at the other. And then at that time, he makes a cry. That cry was such that broke the hearts of everyone. A ghareeb man, a lone man, back was bent, beard was white, blood was everywhere. He gets up and he says, Hal min Nasir. He says, is there anyone to help me? Is there anyone to help the haram of Rasulullah? All of a sudden crying comes from the tents of the women. Imam Hussein looks and he says, which woman is crying in my lifetime? I'm alive, you don't need to cry. They say, we're crying because a 6-month-old baby chucked itself off the cradle and it hit the floor when you said, Hal bin Nasin yansurana. Imam Hussein walks into the tent. You know what the tradition says? He brings the baby up. He looks at the baby, he understands. He says to the mother, leave the tent. Why leave the tent? No mother should ever see a child being dressed for death. Mother goes outside. Sayyidah Zainab walks in. Say, brother and sister, get a white parchment. Open the parchment. Put the child in. As if they're putting the child in a coffin. They start to wrap the child around in white parchment. Imam Hussein now takes the baby and he just says one thing. He says to the mother, maybe I'll be able to get water. Maybe I'll be able to get water for this child. Imam Hussein takes the baby. As he begins to walk, a 4-year-old girl comes. She says, Father, where are you taking my brother, Father? What does Imam reply? He says, maybe there'll be some water there. Mukhtar, when he said to Hurmala, Hurmala, what did you do on the day of Ashura? Hurmala replies, he said, I fired 3 arrows, Mukhtar. 3 arrows. He said, what were those arrows? He said, the first arrow I fired when Abbas had water in his mouth. Abbas was trying to take this water. He had no arms. Abbas, all he had was water. I took an arrow. When I fired it on the water, when the water drained everywhere, Abbas lost his will to live. He said, the second arrow I fired was when Hussein was on a horse. He was rocking. People were attacking him. He hadn't come off his horse yet. I took an arrow. I fired it. The arrow went into his mouth. He said Hussein fell to the ground. He said, but the third arrow was this. He says that when Hussein came out, he had something in his hand. People thought he was surrendering. People thought it was the Quran. When he put the baby on the floor, he said, if you have a problem with me, what's this 6-month-old baby got to do with it? When we looked at the baby, it was as if a fish was out of water. You could see he was thirsty. He would open his mouth like a fish does. He would close his mouth. He would open it, gasp for air. He would close it. All of the army of Yazid began to cry. Then when he took his tongue out, you could tell the tongue was dry. He was beginning to lick it. Imam Hussein lifts up the baby. He says something. He says, oh people, if I've done something, what's this child done? When the army of Yazid was crying, he says, Umar ibn Sa'ad came to me. He says something. He says, cut this kalam of Hussein. Kill him. Destroy him. Because I can see a revolution is coming. They say Hurmala got up. When he took the first arrow, he said the first arrow dropped. When he took the second arrow dropped. Umar ibn Sa'ad said, he said, look towards it. Hurmala, what makes you drop this? You know what Hurmala replies? He says, what can I do? Every time I take an arrow, I see that there's a mother there. Standing there, she's saying, Hurmala, don't you have children of your own? Don't kill my son's son. He says, I took a 3-pronged arrow that brings an elephant down. He says, the worst is 3-pronged, goes straight through a tree. He says, when I took that arrow, it says that Umar ibn Sa'ad was standing in front of me so I couldn't see the mother. When I fired that arrow, some ulama have said, the arrow was going to go into the chest of Hussein. One mother was standing next to the tent. She just said one thing. She says, son, help the Imam of the time. Raise your neck, son. They say a child raises his neck. The hadith says, وَالذُّهِبَ مِنَ الْأُذْنِ إِلَى الْأُذْنِ. The arrow goes in. The entire neck comes off. The blood comes into Hussein's hand. Hadith says the most painful moment for Hussein was this. Sayyidul Shuhada takes the blood, doesn't know what to do. They say the only time that Allah Himself gives condolences is on Ali Asghar. Allah says, Sabran ya Hussein. Sabran ya Hussein. Sabr. Hussein. Look, I can't recite anymore. The only thing I'll say is this. Sayyid al-Shuhada brings the small baby back, finishing everything. Allah accept your dua. Brings the small baby back. Rabab and Imam Hussein go to the back of the tents. They begin to dig. They put a small baby there. They cover the baby. 11th of Muharram comes. 71 heads are raised. Shimr comes to Umar ibn Sa'ad. He said there should be 72 heads. He said, where do we find the final head? He says, I think Hussein went behind the tent to bury something. Hasin ibn Nubair comes, takes a lance in his hand. Mother is now watching. 11th of Muharram, Rabab's arms are tied. She's watching. She's watching. What is she seeing? She's praying. She's looking towards the body of Hussein. Why? Horse riders begin to ride. Spear in their hands. One hits the ground. Mother's heart begins to break. Again, they hit the ground. Second time, mother is watching. They say the third time, the spear goes in. Rabab falls to the ground. Hasin ibn Numair begins to shake. It's as if there's something there. He takes out the spear. A small baby comes. His head was dangling. Shimr comes forward, cuts the small head, raises it on his... La ilaha